Netflix? Seriously? Hey everybody, it's Chainsaw Reacts. Seriously, 2020 is a horrible fucking year. So many bad things happening in the world right now, and then this happens. This drops this morning. The shit just keeps on piling up. The two creators of Avatar: The Last Airbender have both exited the live-action Netflix adaptation. Jesus Christ. This thing was announced back in 2018, and now we're finding out about it. And they both left in June, so they've been holding off on this for a bit. Oh my God, and Netflix have responded to their statements, which is interesting. And I read their statements, both their statements, about why they left, and of course, it's creative differences. And it sounds like it really is that, but there's a lot more to that than just the phrase creative differences. Netflix have responded, of course, we'll read that in a bit, but let me just say this. The comparisons of this show, which we haven't seen a peep of, we don't know anything about casting, the fact that Netflix is actually still continuing to do this show even though they both have left, it's a telltale sign that I have no faith in this. I have no faith in this. They're already comparing it to the live action film that was a complete, I'm surprised. I'm shocked that thing actually existed, but they're comparing it to the live action movie already. They already are. It's pretty crazy, but I mean, I don't blame the fans. I really don't. So let's read this here. So this is from one of the creators here, Michael, who put out his statement, of course, along with Brian as well, put out a statement too. Many of you have been asking me for updates about the live-action adaptation of Avatar. I can finally tell you that I am no longer involved with the project. In June of this year, after 2 years of development work, Brian and myself have made the difficult decision to leave the production. Now, 2 years. You would have thought by that point, scripts, maybe there were scripts, maybe, but you would think casting, and maybe even they would have started shooting something before everything shut down earlier this year, but no, not the case at all. So, we were going to continue on a little bit here, saying this. They first signed on to make the series. Netflix was committed to working with them on their vision. Because in that statement, when they revealed they were both signed on for the live-action adaptation for Netflix, Netflix was fully behind them in saying, we're going to follow their vision of this live-action adaptation. Well, unfortunately, things did not go as we had hoped. Now, that's putting it lightly, because they go on to say that so many things was happening, so many things were changing, that they could not stick with it. Because within their both statements, they were talking about how creative differences, things were changing, and that they wanted to keep the show in the spirit of Avatar. Because when you're doing an adaptation, things are going to change. That's how it is. But we saw what happened when there was an adaptation in live action before, in the movie. That was a disaster. I don't know how that thing got past the script phase. I don't know how someone that looked at that script and knew the show and went, all right, this will work. No, because no matter who would have shot that movie, it would have not been great because the script was so bad, because there were so many things wrong with the adaptation, so many things they fucked up. So now you have the two creators as showrunners returning to the world to do a live-action adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender, to me, one of the greatest shows of all time, their crowning jewel, their achievement. And Netflix is like, well, we're gonna make a lot of changes here. And within both their statements, which I really like this, they both stated that we're fine with making changes because we understand it's not going to be all of our ideas that goes into this live action, adaptation. I almost said live action film, but the live action adaptation, the live action show. They were fine with collaborating because they're both collaborators. They understand that. They understand if the ideas from Netflix, other people are part of the process, and writers' rooms, all that kind of stuff. They understand that it's not going to be all what they want. But it got to the point where there's no way they could continue, and they both were unhappy. They didn't want to continue working like that because Netflix made a promise, and Netflix never held up that end of the bargain. Never did. So we're going to continue here, read a little more. Look, things happen. Productions are challenging, and they are. I would know. I'm making a short film right now that I wrote, and it is challenging. Unforeseen events arise, plans have to change, and when those things have happened at other points during my career, I try to be like an air nomad and adapt. I do my best to go with the flow, no matter what obstacle is put in my way, but even an air nomad knows when it's time to cut their losses and move on. Now, of course, he's making a little reference to air nomads, of course, but he's saying it got to the point where there is no redeeming quality here for me to continue work here. That should tell you something. That should tell you something. So, he also assured fans, this is actually this is a Variety article here I'm gonna post, but you guys can find their original statements they put out. But I'm looking at just, I don't want to look through all their statements and do all that stuff because it takes a lot of extra time. But anyways, he also assured fans that he's still involved in the Avatar universe, which has seen renewed interest since The Last Airbender, which should be Avatar: Last Airbender, became available on Netflix, and Korra's going to be put on there as well. So maybe there's going to be something where they're going to continue outside of the graphic novels, the comics, maybe, but they're not attached to the live action series, and that's a big thing there. So we also have this as well, which they're trying to play a little bit nice here at the same time within the statement of them saying Netflix made too many changes, we couldn't work with them. And who knows? Netflix's live-action adaptation of Avatar has the potential to be good. It might turn out to be a show many of you end up enjoying. But what I can be certain about is that whatever version ends up on screen, it will not be what Brian and I had envisioned or intended to make. Now, the first bit is solid, because at least he's like, hey, it still could end up being good, and it still could, but it's a big if, and I don't honestly think it's going to work. But then he throws in this. Whatever version ends up on screen from Netflix, it is not what we wanted. And that should tell you something, because they told an amazing story with amazing characters, beautiful moments throughout that whole show, so many great moments. And even though it's a Nickelodeon show, as some people like to phrase it who've not seen the show, like, oh, it's just the Nickelodeon kids show, it ascends that shit. It is one of the greater, and I didn't start watching this show until like a year and a half, 2 years ago for the channel. I was lucky to share my experience, my reaction to the entirety of the show, along with Korra. And so for them to get on board and last until June of this year, when they signed up back in 2018, it sounds like they were trying really hard to continue, because they could have easily left early on, realizing when Netflix made that announcement that it wasn't going to be what they thought. And I understand the point. Some people have made this point online saying that, well, they're not team players. Well, within their statements, they said, look, we're collaborators. We understand it's not going to always be exactly what we want. But when Netflix says openly in a huge public statement announcing the live-action adaptation of this show that they're fully behind both of them creating the show that they want, that should tell you, if Netflix can't even hold up a little bit of that, and the fact that they're saying that Netflix did nothing to hold that up, should tell you something, that Netflix really fucked up here. Netflix has made a lot of bad decisions. They've canceled a lot of great shows before they're actually finished. It's weird. Some shows get a final season to wrap things up, and that the actual showrunners and the creators and everything, and they all get a chance to actually write the ending and actually do it. Unlike other shows that get canceled early when they thought they were going to come back for another season, and no, they didn't. So I'm not sure what the fuck Netflix is thinking here. So let's look at the actual quote from Netflix. We have complete respect and admiration for Michael and Brian and the story that they have created in the Avatar animated series, and Netflix spokesperson said in a statement. Although they have chosen to depart the live-action project, we are confident in the creative team and their adaptation. Well, they weren't. They were not confident. And the thing is, too, I think that Brian and Michael's, both their statements are, you know, they're taking shots. They're definitely throwing, you know, Netflix under the bus here. But they're also not, like, trashing whatever it may be. They're just saying it's not ours, but maybe you'll enjoy it. Maybe you'll still have, maybe, but they're both being very honest here. And I think it's smart how they did it. And it's unfortunate that Netflix did what they did, and I'm honestly not excited at all for the show now, for the adaptation. Because if they can't stand behind it and they can't put their names on it, that should tell you something. It should tell you something. Because they wanted it at least to have the spirit of the animated series. And when I heard about this, when they were announced, I was all excited. And I didn't, for once, ever expect the show to exceed and surpass the animated series. Because that's just not going to happen. Maybe to some it might, if it continued on and they stayed on and they put it out as is, as they wanted it. Maybe it did, maybe it would for some, but I think for a lot of people it wouldn't. It would just be a great adaptation, because I do believe that this universe, this show, or at least the concept, deserves a live action adaptation of some sort of capacity. We've already seen one that failed horribly, but this was the closest we would have gotten to a good one, because they were attached, because they know the universe, they know these characters, they know what they were doing. It would have been a wholly different experience because they're doing a live action version of the story, but Netflix was supposedly going to be behind them. You would have thought that it would have worked. So it goes to show that, you know, something can be said publicly, and it doesn't hold any weight. That's what happened here. So overall, this is pretty disappointing. I'm going to keep up with this stuff, and ultimately, this is what's going to have to happen for Netflix. Either they just cancel it outright, which I feel like they should cancel it and just not do it, or they're going to have a huge uphill battle to win people over for this show, if it's actually good. Because it doesn't matter if they cast correctly, it doesn't matter if the trailers are good. What's going to matter is if the show's good, if the show's actually worth watching. Because we've seen horrible stuff that's come out that have had really good trailers to make you think it's good, and then it's not. So that may be the case here. But Netflix is standing behind the creative team and the people that's working on it still. So we'll see. My guess is it's not going to work out, but that's just my guess. So what do you guys think of this information? What do you guys think of them both leaving? Do you think that this is a complete disaster? Do you think that that Netflix should just cancel it outright? Whatever thoughts you have, I'm curious to know. Let me know in the comment section below, guys. I will talk to you guys soon.